I have an additional somatic test coming out. You know, the test where you discover if you have emotional repression in your body. But the test includes a few steps. The first step is you discover that you're creating the pain or the contraction through the test. And then you discover you create that through holding anger back. Repression, as the science says, repression creates pain. In this case, contraction. You would discover all that. Not only that you're creating it, but you're doing that to stay safe from that buried emotion. That test isn't out yet, but let me show you part of it, which is the I create it part. You don't have to get quiet or in deep meditative state. All you have to do is bring awareness down into the body and just as if you're feeling right into the center of any area of the body that feels painful or contracted. Be very gentle. You don't have to force anything in. And then just notice the space around it. Like you're just letting a sensation of pain or whatever be as it is, but fully in awareness. And then I want you to say, I don't have to have this pain for any reason. And then see if there's any energy that responds. And that's your body saying, yeah, you do. Without saying it, that part's unconscious, but we could show it to you if we extended the test. Just for now, trust your body. I don't have to have this contraction. And see if the contraction responds as if to say, yeah, for some reason you do. Again, you can discover what that is if we stayed in inquiry together. But for now, I would just say, write it down. I create this pain. Even if you don't know why, you would not be expected to know why. Because the why is the repression, and that's repressed. But the test that's coming out would show you that on your paper, you would also write down, not only I create the pain, or I create the contraction, but I'm angry, and I'm afraid to express it. Feel and express it. Or you might find, I create the pain, and I'm hurt, but I'm afraid to express that. And that is all that you need for this work, essentially, if you really understand that. Because there's the root of suffering, which is the anger or other repression producing the suffering, which is the pain or contraction. And the same would be true of depression or disease, anxiety, addiction, suffering, because repression works that way. It's discoverable if you know how to look, and it's linked directly to whatever suffering you're experiencing. So people have said, Scott, when you talk, it sounds complicated. It's simpler if you just be here now, so to speak. But really, it's not me that's complicating it, I swear. I'm just talking because I'm a human being that likes to express. That's it. That's all. I just like to. I play music, I express it. I've always been this way. That's why I was bullied. Because I just was very expressive. So you're going to get that with me. But, see, if you understand that you're creating, let's just cut to the chase, that you're creating that pain or contraction from anger or other repression, then your system, even if you understand it, your system will complicate this. Because as much as I talk or express, that has nothing to do with how simple this is. This is very simple. You're creating your suffering because you're angry and you can't express it. And so all the inquiries are designed to meet the complexity of your system, which seeks safety in every moment and complicates the shit out of this. Repression just complicates everything because all we really need to do here is to make conscious the programming that you're creating it, and because you're angry and you can't express it. But your system will just fight like hell to make sure that you don't go there. And that complicates things. Makes it seem really complex. So a lot of my expression is to point that out, how that system is constantly trying to avoid this. So it just sounds complex, but the more you do this work, the simpler you see that it is. And that it's our resistance that makes things complicated or sabotages things or gets overwhelmed by this. You need skill, for sure. That's really important, but this is simple. Once you have that information and you really, really grok it and you find all of that in your body, that there's repression and you're creating that suffering, whatever it is, you can then shape your practice to meet that fully. See, but if you don't know that, now just imagine here, starting off any path or method where you don't know you're creating, or anything, going to the doctor and you don't know you're creating the pain to avoid anger. Even going to somebody else who doesn't know that keeps you safe. See that? And I am not suggesting don't go to the doctor. You should do everything you're doing. But just think about that, what we do. Or even to a teacher. We sit there and say, teacher, help me. And the teacher says, just rest, let that be. That contraction or that pain. Or maybe they pull some information up out of that, but it isn't the repression necessarily. You'll see this. And that's what we want. Unconsciously, we don't want to end the suffering. We want to stay safe and get love. At the unconscious level, that's all that we want. So when we go to our doctors and our teachers and our therapists, we have to remember it's our unconsciousness that we have to work with here. And when we go to other people, we're saying as soon as we walk into the door, I don't trust my experience and I don't know what's buried and it's creating suffering, but I don't even know that. Help me. We don't even know any of that. That's the reason that we go to other people. Sometimes we have to. We absolutely have to get an understanding. We have to go to those people that have this understanding of the root of suffering and then get to a practice that gets to this or something. Because look what we do is if you go to the teacher and they say rest with it, well then you don't even know that there's this conditioning at the unconscious level that's saying, no, I want this to be here. I'm creating this pain to keep me safe, get me love by holding anger back or hurt or sadness. See, it's just we give our power away, and then if they point us or help us in a way that just blinds us to the unconscious, that's what we want. Until we don't want that anymore. And the only way that we don't want that anymore is to go to the repression and make it conscious and bring it into awareness, that conditioning, because as long as it's unconscious, it's going to be running things. Meaning, it's going to keep creating pain or contraction is what I'm talking about today. But remember, if you start any path or practice or anything and you don't know this, you want that. Because you want to stay safe and get love at the unconscious level. I know that can even sound a little bit offensive or even wrong, but actually that's what's going on at the unconscious level. At the conscious level where we talk to each other, you might say something else. But that's the bamboozle. That's how we keep it repressed. We say, I want this, I want that. I want to learn these tools. I want to get free. I want whatever I want. Healing. But see, that also protects us from seeing that at the unconscious level, we don't want that. And that's why we don't get free, many of us, and we don't end suffering, because we don't realize we don't want it. We don't make that conditioning that doesn't want it conscious. And so we continue to sabotage wherever we go and whatever we do. But if you start any path and you know, not just in your mind, but you actually go through that kind of testing that I did with you so that you know in your experience that you're creating it and that you're just not at all confused about that, at least in the beginning, to as conscious as you can be of that, I should say, because you actually can't be fully conscious of that in the beginning, but you can know it in your mind and you can take the test where you see it in your experience and you do know it. But you just haven't lived it yet. You haven't ended the suffering yet, and so you're still unconscious, and that's still running things, right? But when suffering arises, once you know that, then instead of doing inquiry or anything that acts as if you're not creating it, well, you won't do that anymore. Say it that way, right? You wouldn't do any process or do anything that did not take into account that you're creating it unconsciously. So you wouldn't just rest and let pain be there, except for when you're not in inquiry, just throughout the day, of course, just let it be there. But you would know that you're creating it. So that would be crazy to sit there and create it and then allow it, create, allow, create, allow, create, allow. I'm creating the pain, but I'm allowing it. It's all allowed. See, it's a bamboozle. We're creating it. So just to rest with it is just to keep this whole thing going. I'm creating the suffering, but I'm letting it all be there. Create, let it all be there. Create, let it all be there. Create, let it all be there. I'm creating the depression, but my teacher says, let it all be there. So I create it and let it all be there. Create it, let it all be there. Right? And I just say, letting it all be there is just the start because we're creating it. It can't be the way. It can only be the start because we have to then see how and why we're creating it. And that is going to the unconscious level that wants that suffering there. The unconscious creates the suffering to stay safe from what's buried. So that brings us back to how we're creating it in order to end the suffering. So again, I would say look, even if you go to a non-dual teacher or teachings and they sit and tell you that there's no self, which is true, but if you use that and forget, because there's no self, I totally agree, but there's programming that's creating it, buried in the body still. So even being sort of programmed by certain spiritual things, it can just like kind of make you fall asleep around this. And then you still suffer, but you're allowing it, right? It's all coming and going to no one, but it's still coming. And that's the point. How do you end suffering? You get to the root of it. You don't just create, allow, create, allow, create, allow. So I hope that this video will, get you guys started on, if you don't already, linking up the reason that you're creating it. And that's the repression. And you can go to Kiloby.com or to this link below to take the free repression test. And then you'll find the repression in your body. And I can just tell you the two things link up. This programming of I have to create it or I have to have it is linked to I'm angry and I can't express it. Or I'm sad and I can't express it, which is what that test will show you. Then all you need to do there is develop the skills that meet the complexity of your trauma, you could say. Your own system will try to avoid seeing and making conscious that you're creating the suffering because of the repression. And all of your work will just be taking these skills and meeting this very intelligent system that's driving suffering here. And then watch how you'll scapegoat it. And you'll in different ways, you'll forget that you're creating it and get triggered by other people and say, they're the source of my suffering. They're creating it. Or Scott, it's his because of him. Or it's Dan, or it's KI. It's not me. I'm not creating it. There is no me. Or whatever. So stay true to what you've seen here today. Thank you.